we view gasoline? Are you a Shell guy? Exxon?
I get Chevron.
Chevron?
I-
Because
They're like cars seem to run.
better, you say you like their gas, so you think they're good, yeah, you
I
like their
don't buy
gas.
the cheap stuff either.
Yeah, anyone, are we brand loyal to gasoline? It's a pretty generic good.
Chevron also.
Chevron also, yeah.
I pretty much always go to Costco.
Costco.
Yeah.
And he never goes to Costco, right? He's never gonna put the.
It's clean live in San Francisco. There's a gas
We're strictly the Safeway, on Mendocino and Santa Rosa, because they just about match Costco prices.
Costco.
High octane at Costco's not that great though.
Yeah.
Get closer to me, the cost of driving across town to Costco, I would lose the benefit of the savings, 2 cents.
Yeah. And, you know, and I don't know, cause I actually like, and I refuse to put Costco in my car. I like Chevron, I like Shell. But if you read Consumer Reports, and I actually do read Consumer Reports, it says that the difference between the gasolines are virtually zero, yeah. Are statistically insignificant if we were gonna be.
Okay, I'll tell you, there's a Shell directly across the street from the Chevron that I go to. And the reason that I go to the Chevron as opposed to the Shell is just easier to get into the driveway.
Depends on which way your direction, yeah, so you're coming on one way and boom, that's the easiest one, yeah. So apparently, okay, that wasn't a very good example. So what would you consider, perfectly interchangeable, substitutable? So gasoline's not one of them, we all like. What's that? Bottled water, yeah, do you like Fiji versus Costco versus the other ones? Right? What do you got? Costco? What is that?
Crystal Geyser.
Crystal Geyser, and then you guys, I know I've heard of Fiji. Do you always buy Crystal Geyser? You buy what's ever cheapest?
What's on sale?
What's on sale? Yeah, exactly. You buy,
I like Smart Water.
yeah, but for, let's avoid the, but for water,
The majority of purchases, we tend to go with the cheaper one. Once
The
in a while,
cheapest
we're
one.
feeling it, but most of the time, we go with the cheaper one.
and that's a better example, because what do you think the markup on water is gonna be? If everyone always goes with the cheapest, then they raise it by a penny and they're buying Crystal Geyser. Crystal Geyser raised it by a penny, they're buying Costco. So the more substitutable your good is, the more price elastic it is, the more price responsive consumers are, the less you're able to mark up that good. Which is why you wanna do what?
Differentiate.
Differentiate, you wanna build brand loyalty. I don't care if they're the same thing, you just want people to think they're the same thing, right? Just like we said in the last Napa versus Sonoma paper, it doesn't matter whether those rankings are accurate or not. People just need to know, or I'm sorry, people just need to believe that rankings are accurate measures of quality. And that's all that matters. And that's really when we're talking about price elasticity, and that's why we measure brand loyalty. Because are we able to, think about what Nike did with shoes and Jordan, right? That was just, that's creating a brand. And Nike was relatively new. Adidas had been around, Pumas had been around when Nikes came along in the 80s and brought in Jordan. And then they got the other biggest athlete of the time, which was Bo Jackson. Under Armour's kind of fighting him now. And so we see this desire to create a brand loyalty, to differentiate, which is probably the better word, or just as good, but to differentiate your product from another product, even though it may be the same. Even though they may be the same. Can you tell a difference between Adidas and Nikes and Reebok? Reebok even still around? I'm dating myself. How about British Knights? Is that dating? BK? Does anyone remember BK? Or Asics or some of those other brands. Is one shoe really that much different? I was at Foot Locker and I looked at the wall and every shoe was using the same color combinations, the same glittery stuff, and they're all a little bit different, but they all have different brand loyalty, different really advertising. And that's what we're talking about here. The ability to price elasticity is really what we think about in terms of substitutability. So think substitutability, how easy is it to substitute my good for someone else's good, and vice versa. And that'll tell you what kind of brand loyalty you have. That's what we're trying to measure with brand loyalty. Substitutability is a really, really good word. And it was one of the characteristics we talked about when we were looking at price elasticity. All right. So if it's infinitely, so let's go back to the first one. If it's infinitely elastic, it means you're infinitely substitutable. I can substitute your good for one of an infinite number of goods. It's easily substitutable, hence price approaches marginal cost. Markup's gonna be really small. As the price elasticity moves towards 1, then we see that price is going to be above cost. Let's see, it's got to be positive. Let's avoid all that stuff. All right, profit maximization with multiple markets. This is called price discrimination. So price discrimination is possible if you have easily identifiable market segments. And notice that easily identifiable is in quotes. How easy is it? I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. That differ in their price elasticities of demand. So if you've got identifiable groups of people that differ in their price elasticities of demand, then you can exploit those differences. And finally, we have to prevent arbitrage. We got to prevent you from buying in the low-priced market and then selling it back in the high-priced market. Haircuts are a good example. Women get charged a lot more for a haircut than men. So if a woman goes in and says, you know, just a trim, not a full-on new hairdo, but just a trim, what are you looking at? Lowball, what are you guys looking at?
Well, you have long hair, so it's 35 plus. With
About
a trim,
right.
it doesn't
I was
matter.
shopping around yesterday and had a woman that's like $75.
For
You gotta talk to
trim?
her, you gotta find out where.
They don't do trims, it's like,
75 bucks.
you pay that or that's like.
Yeah, and if I go, and if I wanted to get a Jerry curl, I want to look like 80s Michael Jackson. Yeah, I don't know, 25 bucks. I don't know. It's not, but they charge men a lot less than they charge women. Why? Two easily identifiable groups that differ in their price elasticities. Women are much more willing to pay for a haircut than men. And it's pretty hard for a man to get a haircut at a low price and resell it back to a woman at a high price. It's pretty, so we're able to prevent that arbitrage, right? I think I mentioned this once before. Dry cleaners were recently sued for charging women more to dry clean a blouse than a man's shirt. And technically it's the same exact thing. And I actually knew a dry cleaner guy that owned a dry cleaner, and he says, yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same machine, it's the same everything, it's just that women are willing to pay more. So you charge more for a purple shirt as opposed to a blue shirt. Although, and you can usually tell, you know, a woman's shirt from a men's shirt, I assume. Especially if a woman brings men. They're probably women's shirts. Although she can bring in men's shirts also. What's that?
Are the buttons on the opposite side?
Yeah, and, but
Yeah.
yeah, and according to the guy, that doesn't affect how they go on the machine though.
You can think that.
Okay, so those are the characteristics we need for, conditions we need for market segmentation. And then we'll go through a whole bunch of math, blah, blah, blah. We don't need any of this stuff. consider a two market example. Let's go to the graphs. Start it over again. Let's see. Price discrimination. Price discrimination. Ah, started the wrong one. It's the same beginning, so don't worry about it. All right. All right, we just burned through all this. Much nicer colors, by the way. We got all that. All right, so let's go to this. This is a weird topic. It's hard for people to get a grasp on it, but it's really, really important. And here's why it's important. There's this thing called consumer surplus. And what is consumer surplus? If we align consumers along our x-axis from according to their willingness to pay, and think of it as first come, first serve. These people are high willingness to pay, they really like the product, and then these people are the lowest willingness to pay. They like the product, obviously they're in the market, but they're not the fanatics. They're not the people that camped out to get this product. The dorks waiting for the new Star Wars movies, camping out for the new iPhone. All right, so you can think of that first person and look at their willingness to pay, which is just right off of our demand curve. And then you can look at the price that they actually pay, which is P. And you take the difference between the maximum price that you're willing to pay and the price that you actually pay, and that's called, that difference is called consumer surplus. What is it? It's the value of a thing that you didn't have to pay for. It's when you walk away and say, wow, I was willing to pay more for that thing, but I didn't. I got a really good deal. That feeling is called consumer surplus. How do we measure that feeling? Well, we'll find out. You're not gonna have to measure. Look at the second person. Their willingness to pay is P2, but again, they only have to pay a price of P. So their consumer surplus is again the difference. It's smaller than the consumer surplus of the first guy or girl, but it's still positive. And then we kind of play down the line. Their consumer surplus is smaller. In essence, consumer surplus ends up being that triangular area. It's the area below demand and above price. And it represents the value of the good that consumers obtained from purchases, but didn't have to pay for. It's the value of the good that consumers obtained from the purchase, but didn't have to pay for. They got all that value for free. Hence, it's surplus. It's consumer surplus.
Is all of their, the ideas of their price, is that based on the consumer's perception? Like they were going to the store thinking they have to pay this, and instead they got a surprise, they got more for less? Or is it based on them coming from a different market? Perhaps they were somewhere where goods were high, and now they come to a new place and the goods are priced much lower.
No, even if you went to the store and you knew the price. So you go to the store, you buy a bottle of wine or beer or a pizza. And you know the price going in. And the reason you buy it in the first place is because what?
Because you want it needed with the right price.
Because it's worth more than you're willing to pay.
Yes.
Exactly. So you would have never bought it if there was no surplus to it. So, yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be a surprise, although it could be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So let's assume everyone knows the price, they're making informed decisions, purchasing this, knowing that they're gonna get surplus from it. Well, it turns out that consumer surplus is the source of profits. It's where profit comes from. That's why it's really important. If you look at a single price solution, we talked about how a firm, a monopoly, for example, what monopolies do, and we talked about this with OPEC, is they construct this thing called a marginal revenue function, which is constructed, and again, we're not gonna do any of this stuff, but it's constructed from our demand curve. So if we can estimate a demand curve, the marginal revenue function is basically comes along with it for free. And essentially what they do is, instead of setting supply equal to demand, they set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost, which you might have heard of in one of your business classes, and that's where they produce. So they restrict output, and they create what I like to call an artificial scarcity. What monopolists do is restrict output and make you think something is more rare than it is more scarce than it actually is. It's what OPEC does. It takes oil off the market to jack up prices. It's what De Beers does. It keeps diamonds off the market to jack up prices. And again, we've talked about this, but I've been told that De Beers has vaults and vaults of diamonds. Rooms like this, piled high with diamonds. The sole purpose of those diamonds is to do what? Keep the diamonds off the market, so the diamonds on the market remain at a high price.
We talk about countries doing that, and leaders doing that, with supplying, even electricity.
Electricity, absolutely. Enron. What they would do, and Enron is a great story, by the way. Not great, good, but it's a great, fascinating story. So this energy company would literally just tell an energy source, you need to take 2 turbines offline. They'd say, why? Doesn't matter why. If anyone asks you, tell them you're doing your repairs. Make power scarcer so they can charge higher prices. Those blackouts we had in the 90s, that was all Enron. It was entirely, the 90s, it was all Enron. It's what got Arnold Schwarzenegger elected governor.
Now they're accusing Valiant and pharmaceutical companies.
Oh yeah, pharmaceuticals, yeah. The whole point of a patent is to restrict the output. So what monopolists do is they construct this marginal revenue because marginal cost, and as I said before, once you estimate demand, you also estimate marginal revenue, you set it equal to your costs, and that tells you where you should restrict output to, and that's gonna give you your profit maximizing price. This is actually how pricing is done. Profit maximizing pricing is done.
Can you go over that one more time, please? Set marginal revenue equal to.
So yeah, once we estimate a demand curve, we'll get the mathematical formula for this. We can get the mathematical formula for this guy, the marginal revenue curve. Now costs you have, these are your supply curve is actually your cost curve. So we'll have these cost numbers, and once we get our demand curve, we'll get a revenue curve, marginal revenue curve, and where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, at this point, that's your profit maximizing output. This is the output that's gonna make you the most money. And if we just, from that output, we just read up to the demand curve, that's gonna give you the price that's gonna make you the most money, make you the most profit. And that area there, the area above price, above the price where supply equals demand, and below your monopolistic price, your profit maximizing price, that area is your profit. So that's considered your profit. And notice where your profit comes from. What did that area used to be?
Consumer surplus?
It used to be consumer surplus. Profit always comes from consumer surplus. Remember, that used to be consumer surplus. Now it's profit. Very cool graphics. Profits are extracted from consumer surplus. Notice that we didn't get all the profits though. I'm sorry, we didn't get all the consumer surplus. We've got these two triangles here. That is value to consumers that they don't have to pay for. It's value to consumers that they don't have to pay for. In other words, they're willing to pay for it, but they're not. Your job is, if you choose to accept it, to get it. Take that value from them and keep it for yourself or your firm as profit.
So in every purchase that occurs, there's consumer surplus, for example.
Yeah. Because it wouldn't happen unless you thought it was to your benefit. Could be small. Right? If you thought, well, this isn't worth what its price is, you'd walk away. By the way, the reason gasoline is so cheap right now is why?
Quantity's up.
Quantity's up, but why is OPEC flooding the market with gasoline, oil?
Are we switching to winter?
What's that?
Are we switching to winter supplies than summer supplies?
So
OPEC
that we
wants to help us through the
Use
winter?
them and not ours?
What's that?
So that we use theirs and not ours? So that we don't start drilling down and come up with a source that.
Exactly. So right before these prices started to fall, we were getting all this shale oil, and we were getting all these oil supplies from alternative means. Fracking, which is controversial, shale, sand. We're getting all these oils from non-typical means. But it's expensive. But it was worth it when prices were high. Now, when we started getting all this shale oil and we started fracking and we started doing all this sand stuff, that takes our reliance on the Middle East off. It's diminishing the demand for that. And they do this every now and again. Once we start to find, when prices are high and we start finding alternative oil supplies, they'll lower the price so that they reel us back in, and then they'll jack up prices again. So read the newspapers and read about oil stocks. Oil stocks are being killed right now. Why? Because all those oil companies that borrowed and invested in fracking, sand, oil. Do you know what the whole sand oil thing is? They get sand, they get oil that's in sand and they just squeeze it out of it. It's really expensive to do. But when the price of oil was high, like at $100, it was worth it. Oil right now, I think someone said it's at 50, 30 bucks. That's insane. But all those companies borrowed money to get into these alternative extraction methods. And now with oil prices really low, they can't cover their costs. So they're all filing for bankruptcy. That's exactly what OPEC wanted to do. If you study the history of oil markets, and there's a great book, by the way, on the history of oil. You would think it's a boring book, but it's one of the best. It's about this thick. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It is just a fascinating page turner. I know you're laughing because it makes me laugh to even say it, but it's called The Prize, and it's by a guy named Daniel Yergin, and it's like I said, it's that thick, but it's just a fascinating book on how markets work, how OPEC came about, and just, it really is a fascinating book. All right, back to this. Price discrimination. It's a set of mechanisms by firms to extract, speaking of extracting, consumer surplus and keep it as profits. And there's a whole bunch of really cool mechanisms. First one's called first degree price discrimination, or PERP. It's where every consumer is charged the maximum price they're willing to pay. So remember all those consumers? We charge that guy the maximum, that person, we charge all those people, and we get to keep the entire area as profit. It's pretty hard to do.
Because the emphasis is on every, so it's like individual pricing.
Exactly. And where do you have one-on-one individual pricing? Car dealerships, right? They're trying, and it makes sense for car dealerships because it's a big ticket item. They can afford to spend the time with you and try to get that price as high as possible. It's a back and forth negotiation. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's painful. It's painful. I haven't given birth, but I imagine that it's pretty close to giving birth. No? Okay. It's really painful, and I really hate it. And it's something I do poorly. There's nobody that's a worse negotiator than I, especially at car dealers. Well, there is one person. That's my wife. I bought her car. We were at the lot, and we found the car she wanted in her color with the interior she wanted and all the options. The salesman's coming, I'm like, play it cool. Let me handle this. I mean, I'm no better than her, by the way. So the salesman comes up, and I tell her, don't say anything. The salesman comes up, and she says, and he says, well, how do you like it? What did my wife say? That's the exact car, in the exact color, and the exact interior I wanted. I ended up paying sticker. I didn't get a penny off. They didn't take a dime off. It was embarrassing. Travel arrangements, big ticket travel items, they sit and negotiate. So if you can afford to negotiate those things, and if the seller can afford to negotiate those things, then it makes sense. Other than that, it's really difficult to kind of get. But what this tells us is, this is ideally the maximum profit you can get. So again, once you estimate demand, you can calculate the area of maximum possible profits. This firm will make no more than that shaded area. That's the maximum they'll ever be able to make.
Was the Uber, wonderful analytics on that time, was that kind of?
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Because they're
yeah.
saying that, when you make it cost you $5 one way and $50 one back the other
Yeah.
way,
Yeah. What's at night?
With your example here, I'm assuming that other examples like Uber will come, but is this one, I'm getting the impression that this is where there's lots of one-on-one.
Yeah.
Where it costs the firm something
Yeah.
too to spend that much
Oh yeah,
time.
and it's gotta be worth, it's gotta cover the cost of that. So yeah, we're gonna get to, so this is ideally where this is the maximum. So you're never gonna make more than that shaded area. And again, we can calculate that shaded area. Remember, it's just the equation of a straight line. And we can, calculate the area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height, blah, blah, blah. You're not gonna be able to do that, but in my micro theory class, you can do it. Another form of price discrimination is called second degree price discrimination. Remember, the whole point is to extract consumer surplus. So, there's different kinds of price discrimination, second degree. So we talked about kind of that single price where you restrict output and you raise price, and that was that area there. One form of second degree price discrimination is to have something called block or nonlinear pricing. For example, you buy a small quantity, you pay a higher price. If you buy a larger, and there's your profits from those sales. If you buy more, we'll lower the price. And we get an additional area of profits. It's pretty common to see quantity discounts like this. It's real common. All right, and notice that, let's see if I do this. This is the increase in profits beyond the single price solution. Right, so this was the single price profits. And through this nonlinear pricing, we're able to extract another square of consumer surplus from consumers and keep it as profit. So as much as that whole consumer surplus thing seemed like textbook theoretical nonsense, no, this is what we're after. We're trying to extract as much consumer surplus as possible. Notice if we said, well, if you even buy more than that, right, another tier of quantity discount, you buy up to this point, we give you this price, and if you buy a third one, we lower the price more, and we'd be able to extract another little square of consumer surplus from consumers. Which is why in some places, and this is common in like building materials, right? If I need a nail, if I just need one nail, why I would need one nail is irrelevant. But if I just need one nail, I would probably pay one price. If I'm building a house and I gotta buy 1,000 nails, I'm probably gonna get a much cheaper price per nail, right? Yeah. Same thing with wood, or bricks, or cement, or any of those things. You'll get a cheaper price if you buy more. And it's one way to induce you to buy more, is to lower the price. Even if you end up, what do we do with a lot of the stuff we buy at Costco? We had a really good deal on 5 gallons of mustard. I'm not sure what the shelf life of mustard is, but at some point in time, that's gotta go bad, right? But mustard's gotta go bad. Where do you store 5 gallons of mustard? Is that fit in the fridge? And who eats 5 gallons of mustard? How long would it take? Even if you love mustard, pretzels and hot dogs, and how many pretzels and hot dogs can you eat? So what do we do with a lot of the stuff we buy at Costco?
Throw it away.
Yeah, I can't be the only one that just throws tons of stuff away. Because you got a good deal on a big quantity. They suckered us. They induced us with that higher price when we only needed that. Then you're trying to feed your kids as much, how about a mustard sandwich today? How about pasta and mustard? How about barbecued mustard chicken or something? Your kids grow up eating mustard, and you. All right, but enough of my own personal problems with the mustard. Yeah, pretty common. The other part is a 2-part tariff, and I love this because these are becoming even more prevalent. 2-part tariffs have 2 parts, hence the term, 2-part tariff. One is the price per unit, and that's that P there. And the other is what's called a tariff. Remember the whole idea of markup and your ability to mark up above cost. At this price of P, what's my markup?
Cost.
Yeah, is my markup, is my price above cost? Nope. So I got 0 markup. I'm actually pricing at cost. I'm not giving it away, but I'm not making any profit off my unit sales. I'm not making any profit off my unit sales. What I'm gonna do though, is I'm gonna say, look, I'll sell you at this really low price, but you're gonna have to pay a tariff. What is a tariff? A fee, like a membership fee. and I'm gonna set that tariff equal to that area there. And that's how I'm gonna make my profit. I don't make money off the unit sales, I make it off the membership fees. Sound familiar? Health club, country club, discount clubs. Health club is my favorite, because it's a membership fee that you pay, right? So you pay your membership fee, and what's the price to actually go to that? Once you pay your membership fee, monthly or annual, what's it cost you to go to the gym? 0, right? So they actually set the price to 0. You can go into the gym for free as long as you pay a membership fee. And they don't care if you actually ever show up. In fact, most of you won't show up. Well, you'll show up a couple of days after Thanksgiving and Christmas. But then after that, they know you're never gonna show up again. But they've got your membership fee. They got that contract that says you're gonna keep paying me for as long as it says in that contract. That's awesome. I wanna start a health club. It's also true, there's a lot of ones that are a little bit more, so telephone service, right? You've got 2 kinds of fees in your plan. You've got minutes, and then you've got a flat fee. So do I want a lot of minutes and a low monthly fee, or a high monthly fee, or a low monthly fee and very few minutes, right? And which plan you pick depends on what? How you use your phone. If you're constantly texting or calling, then what kind of plan do you want? Unlimited minutes, so 0 price per unit, but what are you gonna pay? Where are you gonna pay it? At the high monthly fee. If you don't use your phone very often, what kind of plan do you want? Low monthly fee with very few minutes. Why? Because I'm not gonna use it anyways. So this is a way of kind of finding out, offering these different plans is a way of getting people that extracting surplus from both kinds of consumers. Those that use phones a lot and those that don't. And you get to pick whichever, you get to tell the phone company which plan you want. And that tells them what kind of consumer you are. So they don't have to kind of look into your mind and figure out what kind of consumer you are. You're gonna actually go to them and tell them that yourself. And that's the best kind of consumer price discrimination, where you volunteer the information. It's also true of printers and ink. Firms like HP will give you a printer. Where do they make their money? The ink or the tone or whatever you want to call it. Right? You buy a PC, even a Mac, sometimes they'll give you, they'll just throw it in the front. Here you go, printer. HP says, give them away. We'll make our money on the other end. What's another one? Is it not in here?
In the life science, they sell these big equipment, you know, that's really expensive, maybe $500,000 more, but it's really the reagent cost.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that has kind of a use fee to it. You know, cars are one. If you buy a, who was it? It was BMW, Porsche, Mercedes, and I think it was BMW, Porsche, and Mercedes. Those 3 were sued under a price discrimination scheme. What happened was that when you bought a BMW, Mercedes, or Porsche, they were forcing you to take it to the dealer to be serviced, even after it's warranty. And how are they forcing you to take it to the dealer? If you took it to an independent shop, they weren't releasing the codes to have it diagnosed. So the only one that can diagnose your car, hook it up to the machine and figure out what's wrong with it, is the dealer. So they would force you to go back. And the independent mechanics sued and said, look, that's anti-competitive behavior. You can't do that. You can't keep those codes to yourself. You need to share it with the rest of us and then ended up winning. So the US Department of Justice, whoever it was, deemed it as anti-competitive.
Seems like they still do that.
What's that?
Seems like they still do that in some cases. I have Mercedes and they need to go to the dealer for certain things, you can come around.
Yeah, it's, I know usually for the codes, because before they couldn't even read the codes.
Yeah.
They couldn't hook it up to the machine, yeah.
So they have it, I mean, they still have that, I think, enforced to.
Some of it, yeah. Well, there's a lot of illegal stuff that goes on that, yeah, that's only illegal until you get caught, so. All right, with heterogeneous consumers, all right, let's say you got two groups of consumers, A and B. And you have the same kind of, you want to engage in the same kind of thing. You have a per unit fee, and then you have a membership fee. And you set the per unit fee equal to that zero profit price. And you've got these two tariffs. And the plan, or if you set the tariff equal to consumer B's consumer surplus, that area represents the value to consumer B that they didn't have to pay for. But notice that it's way more than consumer A's consumer surplus. So A wouldn't enter this market. So if you wanted to retain both consumers, you would have to set the tariff equal to the marginal consumer, which is defined as the consumer that's gonna leave first. I'm not gonna have you do this. But I do have them do it in my micro theory class.
So the consumer B is just losing that surplus.
Consumer B is getting, the firm is losing all of this area of consumer B's surplus. Why? Because if they charge them more, then A would drop out. So this is the most they can charge and keep both consumers. And this is awesome. There's a 2-day symposium at the University of Chicago? One of those two. 2 or 3 day symposium where they actually cover all this price discrimination stuff. Super expensive. $30,000. I'm giving it to you for free. Threw it in for free. But here's the trick. It turns out that this isn't the price profit maximizing solution. You get that times 2. Can the firm do better? Well, the answer ends up being yes. If you raise price a little bit and lowered the tariff, it turns out that now you would get profit on both ends of the sales. You're gonna get the tariff 2 times this area, but now this distance represents profit on the unit sales, which you weren't making at P1. Remember, we're pricing at cost. So now you're making profit on both the unit sales and the tariff, and it turns out that the area with these linear curves, it's pretty easy. Times 2, and we get this profit is equal to that plus that, which ends up being more than what we had before. And the cool thing about this is there is no simple way to find a solution. You have to do it iteratively. You have to try to find different price tariff combinations. And I ask my students to do this on a test, 2-hour test. It's awesome. They're freaking out, sweating, crying, bleeding. It's so it makes the job worth it. All right, and then you just keep doing this, and the profit increases. All right, the third type of discrimination is referred to as market segmentation. This one will do. In essence, you treat each market as separate. You got 2 demand curves. You treat each one as separate. Set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. in market A, set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost in market B, and you've got these, whoops, and you got these different prices in each market and different profits in each market. Men and women, right? Seniors and non-seniors, students, children discounts, student discounts, all those well-defined market segments. Let's see, with different markets, all right, talk about that. We already covered all this stuff. All right, let's get to that. Perhaps one of the best articles on price discrimination ever written. And I say that purely objectively. Marco Bernamonte was a former student, is a former student, he's still alive. He was just here Friday. He is the pricing analyst at Rodney Strong in Hillsborough. More amazing, no, that's not amazing, but what's most amazing is that he's the first pricing analyst at Rodney Strong. Can you imagine that? Rodney Strong's been around for a while. They've never had a pricing analyst. He's the first one they've ever hired. He invented the job there at Rodney. So he was just here on Friday, came out for the football games. So here's a paper on retail channel price discrimination. And this is a really cool paper. How cool? Well, let's go through it. We got 3 retail channels in our wine data set. Drugstores, grocery stores, and liquor stores. If there's a difference in the price elasticities of demand across the channels, and arbitrage is costly, then we can price discriminate. Two big ifs. 1 and 2 are big ifs. 1, are consumers different across those market segments, retail channels? And 2, can we prevent arbitrage? And really arbitrage is simply people buying at the lower cost option. Why would the price elasticities differ? I borrowed a theory from a paper by Narasimhan, 1984 model of coupons. Awesome paper. And I don't say that very often about papers that are not mine. But this is a great, really good paper. And basically what he said was that coupons are a form of price discrimination, which really hadn't been thought of before. And how do you argue that coupons are a form of price discrimination? What it does, what coupons do is, let's see. It's a form of consumers self-selecting themselves into these groups of high-paying and low-paying groups, right? Remember when we talked about price discrimination, we have to have easily identifiable groups. Well, let's say I can't identify in this room. I can't identify cheap people with not cheap people, or frugal with non-frugal people. It's hard, I can't tell by the look, by the hair, by the expression. But what if I can get them to demonstrate to themselves their frugalness? And how do I do that? Coupons, right? This is referred to the hurdle model of price discrimination. What's the hurdle of getting the discount? What do you have to do?
Bring the coupon to the store.
I gotta go through the Sunday paper, clip out the coupons, save them, bring them to the store with me. That's a lot of work for people that have lives, right? But if you've got a lot of free time and you're frugal, then why not, right? So all of us go through let's assume all of us read the same newspaper, and we all read the same newspaper. We're not all gonna clip out those coupons. We're reading the articles, we got stuff to do, we got better things to do. You got problems that you gotta work on, and these things take, 45 minutes? And you've got kids, and you got wives, and you got jobs and stuff, right? You got stuff to do. You got better things to do than to do what? Clip coupons. Coupon clippers jump up and down and say, "Hey, I'm cheap. I've got a coupon." So it's a way to lower the price to low willingness people without having to lower it to high willingness people. That's not brilliant. I think that's awesome. It's not a way to give people, right? It's not a way to. It is a promotion, but it's better. It's a better form. I think it's more accurately a form of price discrimination. Only those that are willing to clip coupons, to jump over the hurdle, are going to get the discount. I stole that idea from him. I didn't steal it. I borrowed that idea from him. And I said that just as low willingness consumers self-select themselves for price savings, different retail channels might provide a similar opportunity for discount. Nobody believed this paper until it was done, except for Marco. Marco was my research at the time. All right, so here's my theory. Has anyone been to a drugstore recently? What do you see?
Makeup.
What's that?
I got straight to the.
What kind of people do you see?
Old, sick people.
Old, sick, and relatively lower income people, right? It's not a real cool place to pick up chicks, for example. They're old, there's something wrong with them, and they don't have any money. Or pick up guys, if whatever, for both people. This to me sounds like a very low willingness to pay group. By definition, it's a low willingness to pay group. Another characteristic they use when they're looking at shoppers is shopping intent. What are people at drugstores intending to buy? Drugs. Diapers, drugs, whatever. But probably one of the few things on their mind is what? Wine. They're probably not there to buy wine. Old, low income, I'm not there to buy wine. What do you have to do to these people to get them to buy wine? Besides put it in a box. You gotta do what?
Make you fun.
Or lower the price. You gotta lower the price, exactly. So this is almost the definition of, the demographic and shopping intent is almost the definition of a low willingness to pay, a high price elastic person. I wasn't gonna buy any wine, but wow, that looks like a pretty good price. I'm gonna grab a bottle of wine with my box of Depends. And who knows what happens, right? I got my Depends, I got my bottle of Viagra, I'm ready for Saturday night. All right, enough of that. Demographic and shopping intent is reflected in the greater price elasticity of drugstore shoppers. Here's my theory of grocery store shoppers.